Welcome to the third Greek Scientist Society Symposium. Leveraging the soft power of the global Hellenic community towards the Greek and Cypriot Next Generation Innovation Ecosystems 5.0.
Welcome back. It's time for our third panel of the day to discuss innovation in technology and how we can set up and build momentum for a tech innovation ecosystem in Greece and Cyprus. Of course, again, you can share your thoughts and questions in the Q&A and the comment section. And we'll now start with the speakers of this panel, which are Professor Yanni Liopoulos, Honorary Professor at the École Normale Supérieure, Professor Kyriakos Kouveliotis, Provost and Chief Academic Officer of the Berlin School of Business and Innovation, Professor Michael Iacobidis, Sir Donald Gordon Professor of Entrepreneurship and Innovation at London Business School, Professor Theodoros Evgeniou, Professor of Decision Sciences and Technology Management at INSEAD, and our moderator for this session is Professor George Maliaras, who is Prince Philip Professor of Technology at the University of Cambridge. He received his PhD from the University of Groningen and did a postdoc at the IBM Almaden Research Center, and he also served as the director of the Cornell Nanoscale Facility. His research has been recognized with awards from the New York Academy of Sciences, the US National System Foundation, and DuPont, and he's also a fellow of the Materials Research Society and of the Royal Society of Chemistry. So, Dr. Maliaras, you can take on from here and start the discussion.
Thank you very much, Chrisa. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this panel. It gives me great pleasure to moderate this. We have an amazing panel of speakers. May I call first and introduce Professor Kyriakos Kouveliotis, who is currently Provost and Chief Academic Officer of the Berlin School of Business and Innovation. In parallel, he is also the rector and the CEO of the Berlin School of Health Sciences in Germany, and the president of the educational organization Athenaeum Liberal Studies. He's an expert in developing new curricula, programs, and syllabi. And in 2009, he created and developed the Masters of Science in Health Management at Uninettuno University in 2 different languages, to which he is also the director, and which has hundreds of graduates so far. He has created and served as an editor-in-chief many scientific journals in the areas of health, international relations, business, and innovation. He has served as scientific advisor to the Minister of Defense, to the Deputy Minister of Development and Competitiveness, and to the General Secretariat of Communication and Mass Media of the Greek government. He has recently been appointed by the Minister of Education as a member in the governing committee of the Hellenic Open University. So, Professor Kouveliotis, may I ask you in what ways technological innovation can offer the tools for enhancing the ties of the Hellenic diaspora?
Thank you so much, George. I'm very happy to be with you here. I think via our panel, we have the opportunity to transfer some of our expertise and views to our viewers, and also potentially to add something to enhance the ties between Hellenic diaspora, all of us that we live abroad, and the local Greek community at home. I have been working for the last 10 years in mainly two big projects. An initiative which has been recently published by the United Nations. It is related to a global degree available in most of the UN countries, and also a project which is to develop a platform for the Hellenic diaspora. And this is why I want to talk to you about today. So the idea when I started creating this platform, it was to bring all the Hellenic cultural and educational activities under a big consortium. So to provide what I call the basis for the development of programs and activities related to the exact needs of the Hellenic diaspora in a variety of disciplines, but since my area is education, international relations, and new technologies, focusing on education in particular. So I have designed how this can be introduced in Athens and in Nicosia via different branches. And me and my colleagues, we have around 20 years of experience in trying to build and develop this kind of curricula, and also using technologies starting from the old Web 1, Web 2, and even today Web 3. So that was supposed to encapsulate all the related areas in education, culture, information, and media under one big platform. So using our experience and my experience in e-learning, combining what we call today synchronous and asynchronous education at the same time, and unfortunately, we have all learned a very, let's say, hard lesson via the COVID-19 experience the last couple of years. But on the other hand, that liberated all the knowledge that we have acquired via previous efforts, and also how the technology helps us. So if we add to this new features like mobile compatibility, even invite some prominent and eminent speakers from other institutions, universities, from the whole of Hellenic diaspora. That means via these e-learning platforms, we can have 24/7 access and with no restrictions in time and geographical locations. So what can we offer? We're designing modern Greek language learning for the age groups from 8, but even to mature learners. Ancient Greek, courses on tourism and hospitality, and even on shipping and maritime. In one of the universities that I hold a chair of Hellenic Studies, the Open University of Italy, Unione in Rome, we have created hundreds of video lessons of all the works of Aristotle on ancient Greek to Italian and English, so that somebody can learn these for free, having access 24/7, as I noticed before. So there is literally no limit on this. And when you have continuous interactive tutorial support, when you have video lessons with prestigious university professors like most of you here that can actually offer some of this of their work in this platform, and combine this with what we call virtual and blended learning, we have an amazing result. The second stage of this development, that is also related to culture, is to develop the first Hellenic web educational TV portal, which some other countries have. We developed something similar in Italy. I'm now trying to do the same in Berlin, in Germany. But imagine if the educational TV was not just for Greece, but the whole, it has a global perspective and covers the Hellenic diaspora and whenever Greek lives abroad. And that can be also courses for Greek history and culture, religious and cultural events, live streaming, professional networking, even virtual exhibitions. The Web 3.0 technology now gives us the opportunity to use virtual learning or having a full digital environment in front of us. Imagine if the international exhibition in Thessaloniki, for instance, was open virtually throughout the year, and we can actually visit all the exhibitors there and be in constant communication with them using, why not, our avatars, as Mr. Zuckerberg announced in this metaverse project that he has. So literally there is no limit. And this implementation that has different stages needs, of course, a full business plan and needs to incorporate all the potential assistance that the Greek government can give us, and also our diplomatic representations abroad, and of course, all our academics and other colleagues that were around the globe. So I will finish here because I can talk hours for this kind of projects. And looking forward to continue later.
Thank you, Professor Kouveliotis. A very enthusiastic introduction to the panel. Let me move on to the next panelist. Gives me a particular honor to introduce one of the most accomplished Greek scientists abroad. Jean Iliopoulos is an honorary professor at the École Normale Supérieure and at the Centre National de la Recherche Scientifique. He graduated from the Polytechnic School of Athens in '62 and was one of the founders at the École Normale Supérieure of the Laboratory of Theoretical Physics, which he directed between 1991 and 95 and between 1998 and 2002. He specializes in high-energy theoretical physics and particle physics. He's one of the pioneers of the field. He pioneered the notion of supersymmetry, what is known today as the Fayette-Iliopoulos term. And in '87, he received the prestigious Sakurai Award for his efforts. He won the Dirac Award in 2007. That was for the prediction together with Sheldon Glashow and Luciano Maiani of the so-called charming quark. He's been a member of the French Academy of Sciences since 2002. Many other distinctions. We don't have the time to go through all of them. What is relevant to this discussion today is that Professor Iliopoulos has participated in many advisory bodies on science and innovation in Greece. And I will ask you, Professor Iliopoulos, you have participated in many advisory bodies on science and innovation. What is your experience from these participations?
Well, I don't want to thank you very much for this introduction, which is extremely too elogious, in fact. But coming to your question, yes, I have participated in many of those panels and committees. And you see, I'm an old man, and old men are naturally pessimistic. So don't take what I say literally. We have, as a member of these ESET panels, as they were called, we have written many reports and studies on how to use innovation, technology, science to achieve economic development for Greece. In particular, one of them was the committee chaired by Professor Stamatis Krimitzis. We made a very detailed plan, which I think is still very good, although we have, of course, to make it more, to bring actual data today. I'm ready to bet that this plan, as well as many other plans we have made, have not been read by any other person except their authors, us. They end up their life in some cupboard in the ministry or the General Secretary of Research and Technology. So the main subject here now is how to go beyond this stage of just saying something which is more or less obvious, that a country like Greece cannot achieve economic development without science and technology, a good scientific method. How can we use the fact that we have a rather good educational system and we produce many good, well-trained scientists to achieve economic development? This is the main difficulty is the implementation stage, not the fact that we know the remedy. We don't know how to apply it. Well, I will stop here because we'll go on further. I don't want to sound, as I said, I'm pessimistic because I'm an old man, but I remind you of the famous dictum by, I think it's Guillaume d'Orange, what's called in French, which in some free translation says, you don't have to hope to try, neither to succeed to insist. So I will say that we may not hope, but we shall try. And we may not succeed, but we shall insist. Thank you.
Thank you very much for ending on a positive tone, Professor Leopoulos. Let me introduce the next panelist. Michael Iacovidis is the Sir Donald Gordon Professor of Entrepreneurship and Innovation at the London Business School, where he is Professor of Strategy. He's the lead advisor at Evolution Ltd, a boutique consultancy focused on navigating the shifting digital competitive context. He is an academic advisor to BCG, the head digital economy expert advisor at the Hellenic Competition Commission, a visiting scholar at the New York Fed, and visiting fellow at Cambridge. Selected as one of the world's top 50 management thinkers in 2019, his research looks at how the digital revolution reshapes firms, sectors, and ecosystems. He is also a regular speaker in corporate events and meetings, from TEDx to the World Economic Forum in Davos. He is the co-editor of Industrial and Corporate Change and publishes regularly in top academic journals, as well as managerial outlets such as the HBR, SMR, Forbes, Financial Times, Kathimerini in Greece, where he has recently focused on advocating for sustainable development. So, Professor Iacovidis, welcome. I would like to ask you, one of the things you study are business ecosystems. Why do we increasingly hear of and speak about such ecosystems? What has changed to make them more important in our times?
Well, thank you very much, and it's a great pleasure to be here. I feel slightly embarrassed with all these long introductions that I think are not necessarily symmetrical with what one has done. But let me start not by answering the question, but reflecting on perhaps the combination of what Professor Leopoulos said and Professor Kouveliotis. And I think that I would agree with Professor Leopoulos in terms of the potentially, well, want to call it cynical, want to call it sometimes, unfortunately, accurately accurate in its description, predicament of part of science, which is it is read by its authors, not necessarily by great many other people. And I think that one of the things that we have seen in the changes in terms of science and its assessment is the shift between only its production to its impact. And if I am to strike a more optimistic chord, it is that we need to start shifting away from only the production of knowledge to the possibility of knowledge to move a particular dial, whatever that is. And in a way, a friendly amendment to what Professor Kouveliotis was saying is thinking about what a scientist like Professor Kouveliotis says, look, we can do all these great things, to tempered with a realism of the, well, what will people want? And I think that this is a nice introduction to the topic that I'm interested in, which is that if you think about not just science, but also the economy, and even what we're saying in terms of our own panel and conference, people start speaking about ecosystems, thinking about innovation ecosystems and development ecosystems. And that's what I study, and ecosystems are everywhere. Now, why is this the new buzzword? Well, there's a couple of reasons which I think are quite fundamental and relevant to the meeting that we have here. And it all has to do with the fact that we have reached the limit of what we can do in pushing both knowledge as well as, in particular, products and services along the existing delineations, the limitations in terms of the division of labor. What we see in the growth of academic knowledge is that it starts cutting across the boundaries of existing trajectories that define the disciplines and the subdisciplines. And what we see in particular in the economy is that there is a great interest in seeing a development that is not in one area, but in a combination of different areas. That's why we're speaking about ecosystems, because we understand that in order to find something, in order to develop a new product, in order to develop a new service, we no longer rely on one company that focuses on an individual part, but in a set of interlocking things that come together. Now, this is interesting, and it's interesting not only for those of us who study the economy, but it's interesting for the changing way in which scientists connect to the world around them. And the reason is the following. If you think about the world 20 years ago, 30 years ago, the idea is that scientists do their research, and then someone, perhaps within a large corporation, usually, would see what implication it has. It will be translated by others, and then it'll enter the production process. What we know in those of us who study technology is the linear model. And we know that that's no longer descriptively accurate right now. And what you have seen is, to some extent, and that's the good news for this, for a group of people listening to this event, a bit of the revenge of the nerds. So you see, as we see this abolition of the boundaries, these fixed boundaries between the different products and services, and the possibility of finding new knowledge bases that can be combined, you have a much closer association between science and entrepreneurial development. That has come hand in hand with a revolution in terms of the availability of funding. You have venture capital, private equity, angel investors, and numbers who are willing to support it. And they need to come together, which is why we're speaking about ecosystems. But I'm ending by saying that the emergence of ecosystems, which itself is the result of the changes in the division of labor and society, is providing great opportunities for the productive use and embedding of scientific knowledge in the production process. And the good news is it doesn't need to be limited in Greece. And what you have seen is that Greek entrepreneurial development has been much more outward facing, because Greece is a very traditional and not very effectively regulated country. But this doesn't stop Greek scientists from finding new ways of adding value. And hopefully we're going to be speaking a little bit about these later on in our panel.
Great, thank you very much, especially for ending on with good news. Let me move on and introduce, last but not least, Theodoros Evgeniou, who is a professor of decision sciences and technology management at INSEAD and director of the INSEAD Executive Education Program on transforming your business with AI. He's a World Economic Forum academic partner for artificial intelligence, a member of the OECD network of experts on AI, an advisor for the BCG Henderson Institute, and the co-founder of Tremo, a B2B SaaS company in the responsible AI and tech regulation space. He's been working on machine learning and AI for the past 25 years on areas ranging from AI innovations for business process optimization and improving decisions in market and finance, to responsible AI and digital regulations, as well as on new machine learning methods. His research has appeared in leading journals such as Science Magazine, Nature Machine Intelligence, Machine Learning, Lancet Digital Health, Journal of Machine Learning Research, Management Science, Marketing Science, Harvard Business Review Magazine, and others. He received 4 degrees from MIT, 2 BSc degrees simultaneously, 1 in computer science, 1 in mathematics, as well as master and PhD degrees in computer science. Professor Evgeniou, may I ask you to comment give us your thoughts on the academia, industry, government triangle.
First of all, thank you, Professor Maliaras, and thank you, everybody, for the great event. It's a pleasure to be here. And I must start that I have huge respect for the Greek academic and scientific community. In all my interactions, I always had the experience of people who are hardworking and with a lot of talent. So there is really a lot in there. So I'll try to be the optimist here and say I'm actually very, very optimistic. And I hope we'll end up there today. Let me start by sharing a little bit my personal biases, because I think it's always critical to be upfront about our biases for two reasons. First of all, they indicate our limitations, and all of us have limitations, and unless we acknowledge them, we will not progress. And second of all, because actually through my biases, specific ones I will outline, I will also make the same points regarding your question in different ways. So bias number one is, as you mentioned, I grew up intellectually, if you like, in MIT. That was back in the 90s, where I went for my undergraduate straight after high school from Chalkidiki, and then stayed there for my PhD, spent 10 years. And that was also the era of the dot-com, which was the wild west of tech and business innovation. And of course, MIT, like a couple of other top universities in the US, are probably, the golden standards by far regarding how to bring research into business and vice versa. So this is a big bias for me, and I always believe that successful academics come in different colors. For example, some that prove deep theorems and deep theories and get Nobel Prizes and advance the foundations of science and technology, and others that actually make sure that the research they do is leveraged and impacting the world, because at the end we are here to impact the world. That's what we are all here for. Impacting the world through making the research leveraged through business that they build. And that's exactly the model of MIT I grew up, and that's exactly the model I always am biased to aspire to. The second bias is that some of the best research I've seen, and I try to do myself the same, is always between academia and industry. The way I say it always, and I always say this to my PhD and collaborators, is that reality brings up the best, most interesting research questions. So one has to look at reality to find research questions that are exciting. Therefore, we have to all make sure that we are somewhere in between business, industry, reality, and the ivory towers of academia. The third kind of bias I have is, again, I've been noticing, at least through my lenses, that some of the most exciting and impactful research and knowledge development has been always multidisciplinary, especially today, especially when it comes to discussing about not just technologies that create innovations, business and economic innovations, impact-related innovations, but also responsible technologies. We are at the stage where I think is historic, really historic. 20, 50 years from now, we will look back and we will say there was technology and science, mostly technology, I would say, because science, we went through this back 100 years ago with people who got Nobel Prize in physics and then got Nobel Prize in peace, right? Same here. We will look back and say there was technologies before 2022, roughly, and technologies after 2022, roughly. Before, moving fast and breaking things. After, ensuring we have responsible technologies that create value and are inclusive of everybody. And we're really a historic moment. And this kind of approach of responsible innovation technology requires more than ever multidisciplinary teams, working with philosophers, with legal experts, with business people, you name it. This is critical to realize, really critical. And these are my biases, and I'm upfront about them. And let me say the same points in a slightly different way. To your question, which I think I answered in some ways, first, it's a continuous improvement process. It's not a transition from day one to day two. We have to continuously improve our academic, business, and government triangle. We have continuously think about how to make sure that the funding coming to academia is smart money. I'm sure all of us have seen a lot of sad, non-smart money coming into funding research. That's terrible. That has to cut. That does more damage than help. We have to continuously make sure that there is always channels across industries, government, and academia. We've seen some of the top academics in the US schools nowadays having joint appointments with big tech. We have to do the same, internally to Greece and externally. Second, we have to make sure that the research is also the R of R&D, not just the R. The R of R&D, always with a feedback loop between academia and reality, because reality gives the best research questions, and the research can impact reality, which is what we are here for. And finally, the third point, as I said, we need, just to say it in different ways, we need to keep building multidisciplinary skill sets. We need new skill sets. We need academics to also understand a bit business, understand a bit communications with business, entrepreneurship skill, understanding the art of the possible with technology. Yes, we develop technology, but what is possible with it? And what are the risks of new technologies? So we can actually make sure we bridge all those boundaries across academia, industry, and government. I'll stop here. It will be a pleasure continuing the discussion. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now let's move to the next part of this panel session where we ask the panelists a couple of questions. I have a list of questions and then we'll take questions from the audience. So let me start the discussion by perhaps asking Professor Kouveliotis on how can technology build bridges for the Hellenic international and domestic environments? Professor Kouveliotis, you're muted.
Sorry. So coming again, the main difference for me that technology has offered us, especially in the last 10 years, is the fact that it's not just a tool or an instrument that facilitate processes, as many people think, especially in education, but it has generated itself as a methodology domain. So this is very crucial to comprehend. For example, we can use Web 3.0 tools for virtual learning, for culture, for tourism, and so on. What we are lacking is to build a highway for this technology, as now we have a lot of different small roads, let's say, that they do not lead to the same destination. So this is the key for me, to try to unite all this effort under a common platform, using the methodology that technology has generated itself, as I mentioned, and keep a very time framework on this. And potentially initiatives like yours is what we need the most. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for this. May I ask Professor Iliopoulos, are the lessons learned from success stories in various foreign countries applicable to Greece? Can we transfer this know-how to Greece?
Well, this is, I think, a very important point, because often we say, look, even, say, Greek scientists have made important progress in the diaspora, and they have created important companies and innovation and all that. And somehow these things have not worked until now in Greece. So there are, I don't have the answer to this question exactly, but I can tell you some thoughts on that. First of all, I'm afraid that the lessons learned from very advanced countries, technologically advanced, may not be applicable to Greece, because the social, economic, and political conditions are totally different. So we may not be able to apply them directly. However, science and innovation is, by definition, has no borders. So we cannot, obviously it is the same innovation. What I often say is that the theorem by Pythagoras has no nationality, no religion. It's just a theorem, and it's valid for everybody. So it is the same thing with technology, and we use the technology for everybody. So what is the problem? What are the conditions that block the development in Greece, so that we achieve economic development for Greece, not for the scientist himself, who can find his fortune or her fortune everywhere, but to achieve development for Greece? What shall we do? Maybe we should look also at countries which are closer to us, as far as, say, population, social conditions, economic conditions, things like that. Which some of them have succeeded better than we have. Well, we all know the stories of, say, Finland after the breaking, many. Finland, Israel. We have many stories like that. Countries that were like Greece and have done better than Greece. Maybe we should try to see what they have done and what we have not done. So at the end of the story, when we finish this panel, we must be able to say what should be done, also to have some follow-up of this. I mean, how are we going to continue this effort? If the effort stops by just having a few people here, a bunch of successful scientists which have succeeded in business, just telling us that it's wonderful to succeed in business, yes, but if we end here, then we have not achieved anything. So we must be able to build some kind of dynamics that continues. And this, I'm afraid I don't have the answer, but well, in the discussion I may have something to say.
Great, thank you very much. May I ask Professor Iacovidis, how is the division of innovative labor changing between academia and industry? Is the linear model, which expects that theoretical research ultimately flows to industry applications, still valid or not?
Well, I mean, I think that you heard very eloquently from Theos that it isn't, and I would concur with the view that it isn't. And there's a couple of different ways that I think about it. The first thing is that clearly what you see is that the interest right now is in topics that are interdisciplinary. And frankly, let me emphasize that this is where we absolutely urgently need the development of technology and solutions that cannot come only from companies. Now, the wonderful thing that did not happen in the past is that the capital markets are absolutely ready to sponsor things that have a very long horizon. What was the problem in the past? The problem in the past is that you said, well, look, if something is very radical in terms of the technology, the potential payoff period is so long that it's never going to happen there. So you will let it, it'll slowly incubate, then someone who have massive scale will take care of it. Well, the good news is that as we see the economy is changing, also again, capital markets are very important here because they are very excited to be part of a new technologically driven growth and development. Perhaps sometimes even too much, perhaps irrationally. They don't care necessarily to immediately make revenues. Now, this is good. And it is good because it allows us to start being able to take technology and help it lead to particular solutions. And the second problem, the second part where I'd like to again emphasize part of what Theos was saying, and that undermines this idea of this, well-structured linear model, is that the problems that we're faced with, and they are survival problems, are problems whereby we need technology because we are confronted by new problems. If you think about the challenge of the climate crisis, from which we may make this world inhabitable. I mean, it is something that scientists have slowly started convincing, not as well as they should, frankly, which also speaks to our ability and our need to start being much better communicators. It is not important for us to be happy about having produced knowledge. It is important to be able to communicate knowledge so that it sinks in and that it changes the activities that we see around us. So we do have climate change to tackle. The technologies that are emerging create problems that business alone cannot properly evaluate. And an example of anything that includes machinization, which is connected with decision making, which raises a host of issues that people have spent quite a bit of time thinking, and where they can apply their training to start thinking on it in applied ways, right? This is not something that will happen in 15 years. The question of just how far we can use the wealth of information that we have created in order to affect issues such as allocating capital are things that companies are asking pressingly today. And this is not science being in some way that I have heard at times in Greece saying, oh, we're selling off science. It is the opposite. It is the possibility of science to have an impact in society. I think the needs are there. And I think that what we need to think of is, how can I take what I am doing to something that is going to have an impact? Now, in terms of ways of doing it, let me again provide only a marginally more optimistic view than Professor Eliopoulos in terms of the reading. I'd say a couple of different things. Another big change that we have seen is that another assumption that has sort of gone down is an assumption that relates to the national boundary in terms of the development both of knowledge and technological development. Given that in many ways we are creating now much more global marketplaces, there is the possibility of knowledge and science that originates from Greece to have an impact beyond. Think about what Professor Wiliotis was speaking about, all these new tools. They do change, and we do see that for whatever issues have emerged as a result of the recent geopolitical crisis, whether these relate to populist politics in the UK or the US, whether these relate to Ukraine, you do see that there is a much more open both knowledge development and business community. And that is where the Greek startups, to a large extent, have focused. And you can see that in the impact that Greeks have. And we know that Greek scientists have got more impact than the average scientist. We're an ambitious lot. We're a hardworking lot. And I think that what is missing, what I still see missing, certainly more in Greece than the Greeks that are abroad, who have been socialized in slightly different ways, not because they're any better, not because they're any smarter, but because they found themselves in a different institutional context. We see a greater attention to having this impact. And I think that the one thing that we need to do is to tell ourselves that impact and moving the needle, and that being either working with organizations or with the government, because, by the way, let me here only partly disagree with what Theos was saying. I work on competition, and I can tell you one of the biggest problems we have is that big tech also sponsors most of the research on competition in the digital world. I'm concerned with that. We can do better. Scientists can do better. That takes courage. I think that we can do that. I think that there is a willingness to do that. And I think that it is an opportunity. The death of the linear model, I think, provides an opportunity when seen in conjunction with globalization. But we just have to rise up to that and then ensure that the solution is not something that we expect to come from outside us so that the government funded X, Y, or Z. But this is something where it is also our responsibility of trying to rethink what our value add and potential and impact is in terms of society overall.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. May I move on and ask a question on startup creation to Professor Eugeniu? Why do the Stanfords and the MITs of this world are so successful in spinning off so many startups, while this doesn't happen to such an extent in Europe and in particular in Greece and in Cyprus?
Thank you very much. And let me first start by saying that unfortunately, and I say it's unfortunately because this is a lack of opportunity to learn, with Michael, we always agree. So in fact, the two of us, we always agree. And in fact, I didn't say that we should go to big tech. I just gave big tech as an example. Of course, you go to every company. Right?
How to be provocative, Theo, sorry.
Sorry, yeah, I think we should disagree more often so we can learn from each other. But let me go back to your question. First of all, we have to understand that these questions have a generational aspect in it. I'll give you an example. We are raising funding for our startup now. And we talked both to VCs in Europe and VCs in the US. People talk about the amount of money raised for VCs in Europe growing, etc., etc. Let me give you one summary of my experience the past couple of months doing this. It's black and it's day and night. It's day and night because the VCs in the US are already a couple of generations ahead, many of them being entrepreneurs 30 years ago, while the VCs in Europe are still in generation one. So we have to admit a generational gap, which means that we have to have a long-term view, be humble, continuously learn, and most important, what I always believe makes organizations great, is that every generation has to focus on hiring people better than themselves. If we don't do this, we are doomed. And very often this happens for whatever human factors. That's the opening. Now, going to your question more specifically, I'll just point out a couple of points. First of all, we need to have role models related to generational issues I mentioned. We have to have role models and celebrate the role models. I had a bunch of role models in MIT myself. It's very hard to find them outside those top schools, but they exist. And we have to celebrate them, not make them hide from the face of the planet. That's the first thing. Second thing is that we have to make sure, and related to this, the culture is positive towards startups and innovation and links between business and research, startups and research, which relates to what we celebrate. Culture is not about what you celebrate, right? You celebrate entrepreneurs, academics, that's what you will get. Third of all is, I'm going back to smart money. I think that's important, and Michael also mentioned something about funding. Smart money, I'm not talking about money. Money is easy, especially today, it's like very easy, lots of it out there. That's not the problem. The problem is smart money. And that's a loaded term. Happy to discuss this further, but I'm sure many of us understand exactly what it means. There's a lot of non-smart money out there, and that creates more damage than value. We really have to pay attention to this. And third, we have to have more flexibility. I mean, I'm still hearing horror stories, I hope they are changing fast, of Greek academics who are having constraints about how much they can work outside academia and how much they can get paid. This is terrible. This has to end. Why? Because fourth, and I'll stop there, we are here, foremost, not to report to our employer, not to report to our government, but let me say to report to what I can say in quotes, God. Not in a religious term, but in our purpose. And what's our purpose? Impact. Create impact. And if flexibility is required to do that, let it be. And by the way, how about value and innovation? If you focus on what matters, my experience has always been, if we focus on what matters and we focus on impact, everything else from value to research output to startups to financial gains will be just a very natural byproduct. We don't have to plan for it, it will just come. I'll stop here.
Great. Thank you very much. That was very clear. At this point, I have so many questions for all of you. This has been fascinating so far. But I think it's a good time to open it to the public, to the attendees for their questions. May I ask people who want to ask questions to our panelists to raise their hand? There is a raise hand function. And then you'll be invited to the stage to ask that question. If I don't get anything in a few seconds, then I'll continue asking questions, and I can go on till tomorrow. So please go on. All right, so I will go on. Let me ask one question to Professor Iacovidis. I'm gonna break the original order. How can Greek scientists connect with and catalyze the growing entrepreneurial and startup scene in Greece?
Well, what you will, when you speak with the people who are involved in entrepreneurship in Greece, they're going to tell you that the problem is not the lack of money. I mean, it's interesting. Both in a round table in London with the research minister and the deputy minister for economic affairs, and unsurprisingly, one of the investors came and said, "We want tax subsidies." Pretty much, I mean, not in these words, but that's pretty much what they do, and it's understandable because that's what investors wanted to do. They want to enhance their returns. I wouldn't fault them. But then the question emerges: well, is this what the bottleneck is? And what you will see if you speak to the people who are involved in Greece is that there is more funding actually for entrepreneurial activities than there are good ideas. It may even reach into the not terribly smart money issue that Theos was speaking about, that in Greece has known to corrupt generations of academics. If you tell people that the easy way to make additional funding is to make mindless reports and that these reports are going to allow them to build a house, and they're going to do that. But the problem is that you want to, first of all, reduce some of that because it is counterproductive. And the second is to imbue it with a bit of purpose and a bit more ambition by enabling them to have greater possibilities of connecting and sharing part of the upside of the value that they create. So I think that part of the issue is institutional, and that has to do what are the limits and constraints that we have in scientists or in people who are involved in business in a more entrepreneurial sense to share part of the upside. There have been some changes in terms of the tax and legal environment to do that, but this is important because Greece, unfortunately, we spoke of all these problems, promises that are happening, but Greece has got an employment structure, a tax structure that is very conservative in nature, and we do have to change that, and that is not easy. We may say what can happen, but we're not tax residents in Greece in order to have the full pleasure of seeing all the benefits, all the challenges that exist in the implementation. But I would say that there are a number of companies in Greece that are proactively looking for people to work there. There's a couple of things that come to mind. The first thing is that there is something to be said in having careers that involve particular stints. There's a stint in which you can leave academia in order to build something because it may require a full-on attention. It isn't something that we should look down on. Unfortunately, I don't think that this is quite the norm or would be quite easily accepted in Greece. This is something that I think that we would need to encourage and support and not see it as a selling out, but seeing as a, how do I turn ideas to have impact? And I think that we have the initial results of these that may start turning heads. I mean, think about what happened now with the biggest buyout that has ever happened from an entrepreneurial science in essence based venture that was Viva Wallet, which was 450 MEP people driven by someone who was relentlessly focused in terms of entrepreneurship, and you have a company that was sold for well over $1 billion. I mean, I think that slowly a few entrepreneurial success stories that we start seeing may help, because I think that these stories have greater flexibility in terms of the employment than traditional established Greek firms, which also are not terribly accommodating for the on average. Although, again, we have great examples of companies that are creating hubs of excellence. So I think that the answer there is be more proactive, see what is moving in your field. Feel free to start calling or emailing people if you think that you have a value proposition. And I think that there is almost a, well, I'm going to put it in Greece, Essikio grillo, pardon my nearly French, in the story. I think that everyone understands what the story is, but our own perceptions of the problems that exist may hinder us from seeking out and being proactive. I think that this is the one thing that we can really change, because it is a self-imposed attitudinal limit that inhibits you from seeing the value. Once you recouch what you're doing, I think that you have a great possibility. And I'm not going to speak now about the changes that can happen. I'm speaking about what we can start changing, and also thinking about how you can connect not only within Greece, but perhaps find any other connections for businesses that do something that in areas where you can add value. It all starts with an awkward call. And I think that, getting out of the hesitancy to do it, I think will have more value add than any other admonition that someone from this panel can ever offer.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Would there be any questions? I still don't see any raised hands, so I'm going to proceed with one of my questions then to Professor Kouveliotis this time. What are the steps for knowledge and expertise transferred to the Hellenic domestic scene?
Thank you, George. For me, we need first to organize what we can call a global forum. That is a huge list of all the resources that are available around the globe as part of what we know as Hellenic diaspora, namely professors, professionals, entrepreneurs, practitioners, and so on. So this electronic database has to be active, interactive, diachronic, and also online all the time. So then there should be, of course, various committees that will conduct some meetings that would lead to policy proposals, accompanied though with action plans that would provide a certain time frame for implementation. And this can happen. Who would ever thought that Greece would have been digitized to this extent, let's say 2 years ago? And I think the key is to enhance the ties that we have around us even more and create this forum. And we need to move from conferences and opinions and article writings to policy action. We need to detach ourselves slightly from the glory of ancient Greece and focus on the enormous work that Greeks are conducting abroad and how to create the narrative so to bring some of this at home. Have we ever thought, for example, why most of the Greeks that move abroad really excel in their fields? And the answer is not that simple, like to blame Greek bureaucracy and lack of resources in the motherland. And also for me, the so-called brain drain has an enormous silver lining as well. And that is the knowledge, expertise, but mainly the attitude that brings. So we should encourage young people to live this and experience this. And if they will return and use their skills in the motherland, I think this is mainly our new task now and not theirs. Thanks, George.
Great, thank you. I'll try to squeeze in one question for Professor Leopoulos on whether we can find any countries that are comparable to Greece in size and economic resources, and which have succeeded in obtaining development through innovation and can be used as examples for us.
Well, I'm not sure I know all of them. Especially, I don't know the ones that are far away because I don't. But when I was younger, the examples that everybody was given was first Finland. So we were all told, I don't know how correct it is, but I was told that Finland was a poor agricultural, rather forest country that was mainly exporting wood to the Soviet Union, to the former Soviet Union. And when the Soviet Union collapsed, they lost half of their market all of a sudden. And then they had to do something, and they did, well, you know the rest of the story, a very great effort in education and research and that, and they really became an advanced country. The other example that people were given, again, people of my generation, was Israel. Again, it was a small country with no natural resources, blah, blah, all these things, and they succeeded in doing quite well in innovation. So I don't know how correct are these examples and how we can apply them. To my simple-minded mind, out of all these people here, I'm the one who has the least experience with say, real world in society. To my simple-minded mind, there is a correlation, a very strong correlation between economic growth, technological growth, let us say better than economic growth, technological growth, and the percentage of gross national product that the country, say, puts down into research and development. And both these countries, Finland and Israel, today they spend over 3, maybe 3.5 or 4% of their gross national product to research and development. Greece, a few years ago, when I had the data, were 0.5%. And maybe now has been gone up to 0.6 or 0.7, but this is mostly because the gross national product went down, not so much because the spending went up. So we say that all the time, and everybody says it, and everybody knows it, but nothing's happened. I want to ask my fellow panelists here who know better these things than me. Is there a way, first of all, is it correct that in order to bring economic development through scientific innovation, we need to put a little bit more money in R&D. And if this is correct, how can we convince the Greek society? I don't say Greek government, because all governments have done exactly the same thing. They all promise to do it and they never do. So it's not a question of government, it's the entire society. How can we convince this society that this is the way, if this is the way? Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you very much. If I may ask a very quick comment from Professor Vieniu on the skill sets needed to develop a successful tech innovation in Greece and Cyprus, and we'll end after that.
Yes, thank you. So I will actually make a very fast comment related to this, but also more broad. And I'd like to suggest a specific action for us today, which is the following. Introduce a new KPI in our way of thinking. Personally, when I see a background of somebody, a CV or whatever, I'm looking not only for the output and the actual results, but also for how many people this person collaborated with, the number of co-authors, and especially the number of co-authors across universities and across academia and business. That's what we have to count. We should not just count papers. That's a dead end, all times. We have to count number of collaborators from top places and across different areas, geographies, and also academia and industry. That's the first action item. And just to close that, I'm still very optimistic as long as I think we are all humble, we have a long-term view, and we are continuously improving and learning across geographies and across organizations, academias, and industry. That's all. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Let me thank the panel. I learned a lot. I found it very exciting, and I hope you'll all agree with me and give the panel a virtual round of applause.
Thank you all very much. I wish we had more time. There was a lot of good ideas that could be further discussed, but unfortunately we have to close. Of course, thank you, Professor Gianni Diopoulos, for sharing the experience that you have on science and innovation, and of course, your comments on how and where should we take an example from other countries which have success stories. And of course, Professor Kyriakos Kouveliotis for his thoughts on the Global Forum that will contain a list of all the resources and will be available to the community. And of course, for presenting the importance of his work on the first Hellenic educational portal for connecting Greek community. We'd like also to thank Professor Theodoros Vieniu on his comments on how reality gives best innovation questions, the limits of academia that he spotted, and of course, his thought on the academia, industry, and government triangle. And of course, Professor Iacovidis for sharing his importance of the encouragement of the entrepreneurial activities in Greece, and his comments on what's the reason of the upcoming ecosystems, and how it's correlated with the changing of the way that the scientists think, and of course his on-point comment on the revenge of the nurse. And of course, you, Professor Maliaras, for moderating this whole session. Thank you very much all. We're going to take a quick break, 1 minute, and see you all later. Thank you.